Welcome. Guess I'll wait just a minute. I like your white-tailed kite virtual background, Brody. That's very cool.
Thanks.
I do. I like it too.
All right, it looks like everybody is in. And if people keep trickling in, that's fine, because we have a little bit of beginning matter before we get to the exciting content. So I'll just get started. Welcome to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers for Thursday, September 24th, 2020. Today's topic is birds of prey by request. And it didn't take much requesting for me to want to do it, because this is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. So I've been really looking forward to talking about it. Our co-hosts today are Tom Bland and Laurel Luby, who are both sharing one window there. You've got a little bit of Laurel's face there. Hello, Laurel. So they will look after you if you have questions or problems. And Jenny Slaughter is not here because I think she's camping at Refugio. So I'm very envious, because there are some good birds that have been seen there that I have not seen. So I would like to go and see those birds, but maybe tomorrow. So speaking of good birds, has anyone seen any good birds lately? I know some of you have seen one particular good bird, because I look at all the photos being posted for the, Santa Barbara County eBird lists, and the curlew sandpiper has been photographed many, many, many times. I've probably seen 100 photos of that one poor bird. So yeah, so this Eurasian species that only shows up every, once in a great while in North America has shown up on our beaches, and it's been very cooperative. It's still there today. It's been there for about a week now, I think. It's been a while, and it moves around a little bit, but people seem to have successfully figured out where it likes to hang out. So they are getting on the bird every day. Very exciting, a little sandpiper, but a very unusual one for our area. So anyone else have any other birding experience they want to share before we jump into our hawks content?
About a week ago, I was birding for like 45 minutes, and I got like a bunch of bush tits, house finch, lesser goldfinch, acorn woodpecker, scrub jays. Yeah, I got a lot.
Quite a list. That's great. Yeah. And the fall is a great time for the birding, because you have more species are around, and more numbers. More individual birds are around. The year's new crop of birds are all out and running rampage all over the landscape, and you can just go out there and see lots and lots of birds. So it's a great time to be bird watching. Yeah, Andrea, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah. I have some plants that are coming to seed right now that the goldfinches really like. They're an evening primrose, and if anybody wants some seed for next year to attract goldfinches, I would be glad to give it to them.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So I assume people can find you. You're not too hard to find. Mm-hmm. Your email address is out there. I guess on the city website, because you are the volunteer coordinator for the city, right? You're
Not for the city, just for the marsh.
Okay. Well,
and
anyway,
the Bluffs Park.
Yeah, I think if you have even some skill with your internet search engines, you should be able to get contact info for Andrea, and you can.
Yeah, Tom has my email, so they could always contact him, I guess.
And that works too. Yeah, and get those evening primrose seeds.
Yes.
All right. Anyone else have anything they want to share?
Maybe I have one.
Yeah, Suzanne.
Yeah, here at the UCSB open space where the golf course used to be, 2 days ago, I saw a Virginia rail, and I know there have been two before for some time, but then I haven't seen any for a while. But then I saw one, and I happened to run into Libby Patton there, and she thought that the two of them. The pair might have had a young one. I don't know. I would wonder whether anybody knows about whether this is offspring of the other.
That's a great question. I don't know. I haven't actually seen that bird, but again, I see it show up in the eBird list fairly regularly. For a Virginia rail, it seems to be sort of has an outgoing personality. It's willing to be out there and be seen, which is unusual in a rail and very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there this morning, at North Campus Open Space. So we did hear one on one side of the bridge and saw the Virginia rail on the other, but we didn't see any offspring. So, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, but we did hear one and then saw one.
Yeah.
So,
But this was an adult one which I saw. If it was offspring, it must have been early offspring. Mhm.
yeah.
All
And then
right.
the bluffs has a loggerhead shrike. And the other day we saw a couple days ago a kestrel and loggerhead shrike on the same tree, just hanging out with each other, which was
Very cool. Sort of the smaller end of the raptor spectrum, you know, the little vicious birds rather than the big bloodthirsty ones. Okay, well, I do have a bunch of hawk content to get to. So, oh yeah, Brody, I see you got your hand up. Something else to
One
share?
last thing.
Yeah.
Yesterday, just something fun that I saw was acorn woodpecker just sort of like right by a bunch of trees. I forgot right where on Ortega Ridge. I saw an acorn woodpecker on the fence there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Was it like caching acorns? Did it have a granary going on?
It was just there. I was just perching there. And, I'm pretty sure it was a female.
Oh, neat. Yeah, that's right. You can check out the configuration on the head. The head pattern will tell you what sex it is.
Because the males, it goes all the way from the front, and the females, it's just a little bit on the back.
Yeah, they have that little black strip that separates the other two colors on the female. Okay, well, that is very cool. And again, there's all kinds of great birds to see right now. I wanted to mention one thing just as a little quick bit of follow-up. A lot of people saw this article that went around about a big die-off of migrant songbirds in New Mexico, like in larger parts of the Southwest, but specifically in New Mexico is where the one really, disturbing video of these dying birds was posted from. And there was a follow-up article about this on the American Birding Association blog that I wanted to share the link to. So it's in the description for the live stream for this meeting, the YouTube live stream, and it's also on the blog post for this meeting at carpwithoutcars.org. So if you're interested, I encourage you to go check that out. They have some really interesting follow-up that they did, where they took a lot of these dead birds and they analyzed them. Jenna McCullough was the name of the ornithologist who wrote this article, and they basically concluded, there was a lot of speculation that the widespread wildfires and all the smoke may have been a factor. What she said, based on what they saw, is that they think it was actually the weather, that this sudden cold snap that happened with snow and ice all the way down into New Mexico basically knocked out all the flying insects at a really crucial time for these migrants. And the birds that were affected in this die-off were like violet green swallows and bluebirds. And these are birds that specialize in flying insects. So if all the flying insects get knocked out, and there'd been a dry summer this year, so there are fewer flying insects available over the last several months. So the idea is that these birds were already kind of, on the borderline in terms of their fat reserves, and then they didn't have any access to food and they had to leave because of the weather, and they just didn't have the energy stores to make it. So they ended up basically starving to death and dying of hypothermia. And they got like as far as New Mexico, and then a bunch of them died. So it's kind of a sad story, but it's, I think, interesting to kind of learn more about what actually went on. And to me, it gives me a better understanding of what's going on with these birds and just the challenges they face in migrating. So I thought that was interesting. So I shared that link.
And then I heard when stuff like that happens, the strongest birds make it, so it brings the best genes to the new offspring.
That is true. Yeah, there's a natural selection process that goes on.
Also, one more.
Sure, Suzanne.
I wonder whether they actually also might, some of them might choose to stay here and not migrate. But I thought you saw a cliff swallow, right?
Yeah, there's this one cliff swallow hanging around that really shouldn't be here anymore at the mouth of Carpinteria Creek. And I noticed it seemed to be missing most of its tail. So I wonder if there's an issue where the bird was actually, in a dust up with a hawk or something, and was not able to make the migration when it needed to. So now it's kind of in this, kind of iffy place where it's hanging around. It probably should get a move on,
Mhm.
but we'll see. Yeah.
And we saw 3 at the Bluffs the other
Yeah.
day.
Oh, maybe he's had some friends now.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to mention that article, and then I also wanted to share. Oh, this was fun. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to try to spotlight my video if I can, which makes me bigger in the live stream. Maybe I'm not going to do that because that seems complicated. So I want to share this book. So this is a new book that is just out from Joan Lentz, a well-known name in Santa Barbara County birding. For many years, Joan taught the birding classes at Santa Barbara City College. For many years, she organized the Santa Barbara Christmas bird count. And she is an author of a number of books about birds and the shoreline and Santa Barbara. So this is her newest book. It just came out. Story of a Santa Barbara birder, and I'm a big fan, and I could go on and on about it, but then I wouldn't have time to talk about hawks. But I encourage you to check out this book if you're like me and you're really into Santa Barbara birding. It's a really great story, and she tells it really well. So I'm promoting this book. I think it's a great book. And as long as I'm doing that, I wanted to mention on the subject of tonight's meeting on hawks, I just wanted to share a few of my favorite hawk books. So again, I'm just doing a little bit of a plug. So this is Hawks in Flight, which is a book by Pete Dunn and David Sibley and Clay Sutton. And it's a great guide to basically identifying hawks in flight. And this is the second edition. The first edition came out a few decades ago, and it really, by all accounts, revolutionized the world of hawk identification. It was very well received. And for people who really focus on hawks and hawk watching, which we'll talk about later in the meeting, this was the Bible. This was something that really changed the way they looked at that. And then another book I also want to talk about that I really like is Hawks at a Distance. This is by Jerry Ligori, who's very much one of the leading authorities on North American hawks and North American diurnal raptors. Anyway, this book is great. It's got tons of photos that when you look at it, you think, wow, those photos are really small. But that's kind of the point. He's talking about, when you see hawks at a distance, this is what they look like. So it's a really interesting book that goes into detail about how to identify them. And the last one of those I wanted to share is Raptors of California. This is part of the California Natural History Guides by Hans Peters and Pam Peters. And this book I really like because like a lot of guides, it has sort of general information in the first half and then species accounts in the second half. And it's the stuff in the first half that I really love. I mean, the species accounts are fine as well. But the first part where it talks about the ecology and conservation and just life histories of the different raptors in California is really, really well done. And I really like it. Andrea, I see you have your hand up.
They're having a discount on UC books right now until the end of the month, I think. So it's a good time to buy it if you want to do it.
Yeah. Yes, I recommend all of those. And then I guess the last recommendation.
Where do you buy them? Where do you buy them?
Well, the Joan Lentz book, I bought at Chaucer's up on State Street in Santa Barbara because I'm trying to support the local booksellers. And certainly, you can, if you want to go, help the brick and mortar bookstores stay in business, that would be a good place you could go to get a lot of these books. I also buy stuff from Amazon and, other online sellers.
It's University of California Press is having a sale right now if they want the Raptor book.
Yeah, and I do recommend. I like it a lot. I mean, it's a good field guide, but it's also I just like reading it. It's got really well written content about hawks, and I like hawks, hence this meeting. And the last thing I wanted to recommend is an app. There is an app you can get for the iPhone or for Android phones called Raptor ID. And it was created in part by Jerry Ligori, who's the author of this Hawks at a Distance book. And what makes it so neat is that it has videos. So you go through the different species, you can watch a video in the app, and it's narrated by Jerry Ligori describing the things you see when the bird is in flight and how it helps you distinguish it from other species. And as we'll talk about when we get into the actual topic, flight characteristics are hugely helpful for identifying raptors, especially when they're, off in the distance, as you often see them. So I recommend that app as
What is
well.
it called again?
It is called Raptor ID. And it used to cost, I think, $10. It was fairly pricey for an app, but I was looking today and I think it's actually free now. So you can look for it and see if you can get it on your phone, because it's very handy to be able to, be out there in the field and look at a video and have Jerry Liguri tell you, oh, look at these wing beats, and you can actually see the wing beats. In a field guide, you're always having to kind of, what do they mean when they say snappy wing beats? It's like, I don't know, what does snappy look like? But in an app with a video, you can actually see what they're talking about. So I like that a lot. Okay, anything else before we jump into the presentation? Last chance for anything not directly related to hawks. I mean, you can interrupt with whatever you want, whenever you want, but all right, on to hawks. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Yeah, I guess I want this one, and I will do this, and I will do this. Okay, so if I've done this successfully, you should be seeing a hawk. Did it work? Give me a thumbs up if it worked. Yay, thumbs up. All right, thank you. Okay, so let me talk about birds of prey. And here, the term raptor and birds of prey are kind of used interchangeably. Basically, I think the definition is it's a bird that hunts live prey and has a beak that's adapted for sort of ripping flesh. And it has talons. It has these really powerful claws that they also use for grabbing their prey, or in some cases for the actual killing of the prey, as they're doing that with their talons. So that makes a raptor, which includes owls. But we've done owls in a separate meeting. So in this meeting, we're just talking about diurnal raptors. So the raptors that are active during the day. So we're excluding owls. Anyway, so raptors are big, bold hunters. And that is one of the things that makes them so cool. There aren't too many of them around. So, you go out bird watching and you see, 20 goldfinches or 100 blackbirds. You're not going to see 20 or 100 raptors, most likely, except in rare cases. If you can put yourself on a migration route that concentrates them, then you can see a lot of raptors. We'll talk about that later. But in the normal course of your day-to-day bird watching, you're going to just see them in like ones and twos, probably. And they're an important indicator species, which is, again, because they're up at the top of the food chain, they're sort of a portable data recorder that is giving you a readout on the health of the environment. And this shows up in things like, in the 1950s, when DDT, the pesticide, was in widespread use in the US. This showed up in raptors. It showed up specifically in peregrine falcons, because the DDT was being concentrated in the prey species and then in the bodies of the peregrines, to where it started to, they had enough DDT that their eggshells weren't thick enough. It interfered with the formation of their eggshells, and they stopped being able to breed successfully. And basically, in the late 1950s, peregrine falcons were extirpated, that is locally extinct, in the eastern half of the country, and they weren't doing well in the rest of the country. And so then, people took notice, and Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, and we banned the use of DDT in this country. And with that, and with some recovery programs that did a lot of captive breeding and releases, peregrines are now doing quite well in this country. And you can see them around Carpinteria, which is great. Anytime I see one, I get very excited. And in general, Santa Barbara County is a great place to see raptors. It is a really good hawk watching place. And we'll talk about that in more detail. So if you want to see more birds of prey, how can you do this? How can you have more of them in your life when you're out bird watching? And one sort of obvious piece of advice is to look for them. So scan the telephone poles, scan the distant trees. They tend to perch up in a prominent place, and they're big. If you learn to look for that, you take your binoculars and check all the nearby big trees, you may well see a hawk up there. So that's something you can do. And look for them soaring. So these big raptors, they like to hunt efficiently. So they will soar. And it's kind of a nice thing. If you're like, I'm always saying like the best time to go bird watching is the crack of dawn, and second best is probably right before it gets dark. But raptors are an exception to that. A lot of these bigger raptors aren't really active at the crack of dawn. If you want to see them, you can go out later in the day because they get moving and active when it heats up and their thermals start to appear. You know, the land heats up and it creates these rising bubbles of air that they can circle in and gain altitude without having to flap their wings at all. So you can look for that. You can look for them soaring. And other birds will help point them out to you. So crows, for example, are notorious for calling attention to any nearby hawks. They are as interested in hawks as I am, and they will loudly announce it if they find one. And they'll yell at it, they'll dive repeatedly near its location. So if you see crows doing that, there's probably a raptor there. So go ahead and look at the point they're diving at and see if you can pick out the hawk that's there being harassed by them. And then this is very cool. I've talked about this before when we talked about birding by ear. But you'll be out birding and you're in some thicket or some underbrush and there's little birds tweeting here and there. And all of a sudden you'll hear this outburst of high-pitched twittering, like tweet, 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 tweet from all around you. Like multiple birds will start doing it at once. And what's going on is that's an aerial predator alarm call. The birds are basically saying, oh, there is a hawk in the air. And birds will communicate across species with that alarm call. When they hear that, they will dive for cover. It's sort of the flip side of the mob recruitment call. So when birds find, like when a bunch of little songbirds find a raptor that's perched, they'll sometimes mob it, where they'll all gather around and scold it, and they'll make these sort of chittering kind of noises. And when birders make the pishing sound to try and get birds around, they go like that. What they're doing is they're imitating a mobbing recruitment vocalization. They're basically acting like they've got a predator that they're mobbing, and other birds will pop up into view and go, oh, where's this predator that's being mobbed? I want to check this out. But birders don't imitate the aerial predator alarm call, this high-pitched twittering, because it has the opposite effect on birds. They don't come out, they hide. They disappear for cover. So if you're out birding and you hear this, just suddenly from all around you, a bunch of birds start twittering like that, look up, because there's a hawk up there. And more often than not, you will actually see a hawk flying over when you hear that. So it's a cool way to be alerted to the presence of a raptor. So you see a raptor, and now you need to identify it. You need to figure out what it is. And it's very helpful if you can sort of classify them into different groups, because raptors tend to look kind of similar to each other. They have sort of the same basic coloring and plumage patterns. I mean, there are differences, and the differences are important to learn, but they're not as different as, say, like colorful songbirds. One bird is blue and one bird is red, and it's very obvious. With raptors, they're all kind of brown, or maybe gray, or they're sort of muted colors. They're kind of camouflaged. But what they do have that distinguishes them, that's very useful if you're trying to identify them, is they're all adapted to slightly different hunting styles. And this shows up in their body shape, the proportions, and their flight characteristics, how they fly. So it's very important, it's very helpful to learn these different groups of birds. So one group is the buteos, and these are the sort of big classic hawks. And they are adapted for soaring. They're very good at, again, circling in the air in updrafts or following a ridge in an updraft of wind and expending very little energy. They can go up there and they have really acute eyesight. They can spot their prey down below and then drop down on it. And to support this soaring, they have relatively long and relatively broad wings. So the wings are broad front to back, and they're also long. And then they have a sort of short but wide fan-shaped tail. So this basic buteo pattern, learn to recognize that shape and say, okay, I'm looking at a buteo, and then you can start to narrow things down from there. And the other thing they have is they're not super fast flyers. So their bodies are kind of compact. They're not really long and aerodynamic bodies like some of the faster raptors. They're more like chunky, they've got like a big body that's just sort of floating around up there. And when they flap their wings, when they do need to flap, their wing beats tend to be fairly slow and kind of labored. So it's like flap, 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 flap. That's kind of a buteo flapping pattern, or like a large buteo would maybe be like that. So those are your buteos. The next group you should learn is the accipiters. And these birds are typically forest hunters, and they're specialized in bird prey, some mammal prey, but mostly birds that they go after. And they are designed for fast acceleration and maneuverability. They're like interceptors, right? They're out there trying to intercept birds and catch them. And so they have relatively short wings, because this gives them this quick burst of acceleration, right? They can also soar, and they can spread their wings out and soar like a buteo, but their main thing that they do is they flap very rapidly, and they do this flap, 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 glide, flap, 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 glide kind of thing. So look for that. And they have a relatively long tail, which helps steer them. So it's like a rudder, they can, and an accipiter, like a Cooper's hawk, like this one, can fly into foliage. They can fly into a tree and dodge through the branches and chase their prey. They also have relatively long legs, and they will actually fly right into a bush and jab their legs in and grab the bird that's tried to escape them by diving into a bush. So it's very exciting if you get a chance to see that. So those are accipiters. And then the last of sort of the big three groups that you should learn are the falcons. And it's kind of interesting in that back in the day, in the olden days, when I first started bird watching, falcons were right next to the other raptors in the field guide, because it was assumed that they were closely related, because that taxonomic order, how the different families are laid out in the field guide, is based on presumed closeness of relationship. Like, you put the families next to each other in the taxonomic order that you think diverged from each other relatively recently in terms of the evolutionary past. But these days, they've been able to use genetic analysis, and they actually know that falcons are not that closely related to the other hawks. So they've moved them in the field guide. They're now fairly separate from the other raptors. And the family that they're most closely related to, the falcons, is parrots, which is kind of an amazing thing. And once you learn that, you see them flying, you think, wow, that really does sort of seem like a parrot. Like if you see parrots flying and you see a falcon flying, they're pretty similar in their flight characteristics. And the thing that falcons have that they're really adapted for is speed. They are fast. That is their thing. So these long, narrow, pointed wings that they have, and sort of this long kind of teardrop, streamlined body shape that they have, that's the falcon look of speed, and they are super fast. That's the Peregrine Falcon here is the fastest animal on Earth. It's basically been clocked over 200 miles an hour when it dives on its prey, and it's just very cool. Yeah,
I've also heard that parrots and stuff are closely related to pigeons and doves.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't even know that.
I think they are, but that
Very
means
cool.
that falcons aren't too far from them either.
Yeah,
So.
and falcons frequently prey upon pigeons and doves. So I guess
Yeah.
they're like, hey, hello, relative, I'm now going to kill you. Yeah, and the way that peregrine falcons in particular, the way they hunt is just really interesting to me. Like I was saying before, the buteos and the accipiters, they tend to use their talons as their main weapon. Like when they actually get a hold of their prey and kill it, it's kind of gruesome, but they kill it by like stabbing it with their talons. That's how you get killed if you're caught by one of those hawks. Peregrines and falcons generally have a different approach. So a peregrine will dive, again, at 200 miles an hour, super fast, or just flat out in level flight. They're very fast too. They will chase a bird down and they'll zip past it. They'll ball up their talons into fists, and they'll kind of punch the bird as they go by it. They'll just kind of bang into it and knock it senseless, or hit it in the wing and kind of make it flutter. And then they'll swoop back and grab it. And then the way they actually kill it is they will chomp into its neck. And falcons have this little special, it's almost like a little tooth on the edge of their mandible, their upper beak, this little prong that they use that helps them sever the spinal cord of their prey. So in a way, it's maybe a little more humane. I don't know, if I had to choose like which raptor I wanted to be killed by, I think I'd rather be killed by a peregrine falcon, where I didn't even know what was coming and just bam, I was suddenly knocked cold and never knew what happened to me. I don't know. That's kind of an odd thing to
And I
think
heard
about.
sometimes they'll just knock the prey out of the air and just hit them on the ground and they'll just die.
Yeah, they again, it's wild to see. I don't think I've ever seen a peregrine actually. I've seen them chase things, several times. I don't think I've ever actually seen a successful, no, I've seen a peregrine pick up a shorebird. That's right. I've seen it pick up, I think it was a sanderling, and just kind of came zipping in and grabbed it and took off with it. So yeah, it's exciting. All right, on we go. There are some more types, not as numerous as those big 3 types, but harriers. We have one species of harrier, the northern harrier, and they're sort of known. They have kind of long, narrow wings, and they fly in a dihedral, so their wings kind of angled upward in a V shape, and they fly low over the ground and kind of rock back and forth. There's sort of a characteristic way that they fly. They have a long tail, and they actually have a facial disc. It's not. This is kind of a poor photo. This is one of my photos, so it's
Sort
not
of like
very
an
high quality.
owl.
Exactly. They have a facial disc like an owl, and used in the same way. They're using it to hear. They're using it as like a little parabolic reflector. And as they're flying low over the grass or whatever, they will hear the rustling of a little rodent and they will pounce on it. They'll drop down on it and grab it. So that's your harrier flight style and body type. And finally, kites, which are sort of similar in that they've got this long, narrow, very graceful wings and a long tail, and they will hover or kite. They'll hold position in the air. They'll stay in one position while they're looking at what's down there. And if you go out to the Carpinteria Bluffs, with any luck, you will see a white-tailed kite out there, or out at the Carpinteria Salt Marsh, we have them too. They'll be up there fluttering away. And again, once you learn to recognize that flight style, it's very easy to pick them out. Okay, so I'm going to keep going because there's a lot of raptors to talk about. So here are 16 raptor species, all of which you've got a decent chance of seeing in Santa Barbara County. There's a few others that you've got a smaller chance of seeing that I didn't include because this was already a big enough list. But here are the 16 raptors I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to go pretty quickly through them. And I'm going to divide them up into 2 groups. So the first group of 10 is going to be the ones you can see relatively easily. Like just, my sense is that going out birding around Carpinteria, if you're actively birding throughout the year, including the fall and winter months, when, as you can see from these histograms, we get more of the species around, you're going to see these 10 species, or you've got a good chance of seeing these 10. And then I'll talk about the 6 at the end that are kind of take a little more effort to see those. But of course, it's correspondingly exciting when you do see them. All right, so let's go on with the easier to see species. Oh, and I wanted to do some vocalizations so you can hear that. Let's see if I've done this right. Resume the share. I'm sorry, I was not as well prepared as I should have been here. That's the wrong raptor. So did you hear that hawk screaming just now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I am set up. All right, so we'll start with this bird, which is not the one you just heard. So here's a recording from Zeno Canto. This recording is by Paul Marvin. And that is the scream of the red-tailed hawk. Although once you learn these raptor vocalizations, you'll be watching a movie and they use that red-tailed hawk scream for everything. They'll show an eagle and they'll play a red-tailed hawk scream because it sounds more, exciting than the eagle's actual vocalization. So in terms of Buteos, this is the default Buteo. And I'll just say this is like the default hawk. If you see a hawk around here, assume it's a red-tailed hawk until proven otherwise, because they're by far the most numerous of the ones we see. But you should definitely learn to recognize them because again, you're going to be studying these hawks, trying to find the more rare ones, and you're going to have to exclude red-tailed hawk before you can get to that identification. So something that's really useful to look for is this is called a patagial bar. This is a dark bar at the inner edge of the front of the wing. And red-tailed hawks, like a lot of hawks, occur in a lot of different morphs. Like this is a sort of a light morph adult red tail. There are also darker morphs. So there's a lot of variety. It's kind of like gulls in a way, where it's talking about how there's so many plumage variations. Raptors have a fair number of plumage variations as well. Not as many as gulls maybe, but still a fair amount. But in most of the plumage variations of the red-tailed hawk, you're going to see this dark patagial bar. And in the other Buteos that we have around here, you're pretty much not going to see a dark patagial bar. So it's a good thing to look for. And again, because of time, I'm just going to zip along. I'm not going to go ahead and click through to the All About Birds website so we can get to more raptors. So here's probably in some ways the next most common buteo that we see around here. And this is the one I started to play earlier on accident. This is a recording by Brian Hendricks. So if you've had, and this is a red-shouldered hawk. So if you've had these nesting near your house, as we have where we live, we had them just one block over nesting, you hear that scream a lot. And it's that repeated scream, that that's the red shoulder. Like the one long scream is the red-tailed hawk. So you can keep track of that. You can understand most of the hawk vocalizations you're going to hear around here are going to be one or the other of those. They're significantly smaller than the red-tailed hawk. You know, I mean, they're still a pretty good sized raptor, but they're not as big as a red tail. And when they fly, their flight characteristics are kind of almost more like an accipiter than a big buteo. When they flap, it's kind of like flap, 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 glide, flap, 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 glide, which is kind of like what an accipiter does. But they do have sort of a shorter tail and the broader wings, longer, broader wings. Anyway, and they're kind of obviously patterned too, the reddish and the black and white stripes on the tail. So consult your field guide. I'm not going to go through all the characteristics because again, I want to talk about more fun hawk topics rather than just identifying them. But if you want me to stop and click through and look at the photos at All About Birds, let me know and we can go look in more detail. But otherwise, I'm just going to keep going at a dizzying pace. Okay, so here's actually two different species together. We got one species on the left and another species on the right, and they are quite similar. And this is one of the real challenges of identification for local raptors. So here's the vocalization of the bird on the left. And here's the vocalization of the bird on the right. And these were recordings by Lance Benner and Frank Lambert. Okay, and these are the Cooper's hawk and the Sharp-shinned hawk. And telling them apart is sometimes tricky. We have more Cooper's hawks than Sharp-shinned hawks for most of the year, at least. In the fall migration, if you go out to a hawk watch site, you might actually see more Sharp-shinned hawks for a time as they come migrating through. And we do have, both of them around during the fall and winter months. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the things that people tend to talk about are the Cooper's hawk. It's in flight, its head projects farther and its wings tend to be more straight across. This picture doesn't show it particularly well. And in a Sharp-shinned hawk, the wings kind of sweep forward a little bit and the head is smaller and doesn't project as much. So it kind of gets lost in the gully here is how it's described. And then the tail, the Cooper's hawk's tail tends to be more rounded and the Sharp-shinned hawk's tail tends to be more squared off, although that kind of looks round as well. But if you think about it, if you close it up, it would be sort of squared off. And the Cooper's hawks are bigger than the Sharp-shinned hawks. And that manifests in their flight characteristics. And there's other details that we could talk about. But something I thought was really interesting that I wanted to share was this study that was done up at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, which is a famous hawk watch site up in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. And when we have these sort of tricky IDs, these identification challenges, these species pairs that are kind of similar, birders, as they get more experienced, will get more confident, like, oh, that is a Cooper's hawk, or oh, that is a Sharp-shinned hawk. But was it really? Like, how do we know? We know because the birder is confident because of their experience, but maybe it's not true. Well, they did this really cool study where they were banding, they were using nets to capture raptors for banding purposes. And they had hawk watching going on. They had these experienced raptor counters active. And they said, hey, we can actually do an experiment. So what they did was they captured these Sharp-shinned and Cooper's hawks and they banded them and they weighed them and measured them. And with this, having them in their hands and able to measure all these different characteristics, they were able to very confidently place them to, species and sex. Okay, it's a male Cooper's, or it's a male Sharp-shinned, or it's a female Cooper's, female Sharp-shinned. And then they would take the bird and they would radio the hawk watchers and say, okay, we're about to release it. And from a place of concealment, so the hawk watchers couldn't like get a sense of how big the bird was relative to the human who was releasing it. They would release the hawk, and it would fly out, and the hawk watchers would identify it like they do with all the other hawks coming through. And then they were able to look at the results. And what they found was certain species sex combinations were very prone to misidentification. So even with experienced hawk watchers, these are people with like 5 years of hawk watching experience, about 23% of the juvenile male Cooper's hawks were misidentified as sharp-shinned hawks. So with these hawks, with all hawks pretty much, the females are significantly larger and the males are significantly smaller. So what that means is a male Cooper's hawk is pretty close in size to a female sharp-shinned hawk. So what these bird identifiers were doing is they were correctly saying, oh, this hawk is about sharp-shinned size. But what they were missing was that, yeah, that was a male Cooper's hawk that you were looking at. In almost a quarter of the cases, they were making that misidentification. So I thought that was really fascinating, and it, for me, encourages me to, use the Cooper's / sharp-shinned identification probably more often. Like if it looks like a really big one, okay, it's a female Cooper's, I can probably pick that out. If it looks really small, that's probably a male sharp-shinned, so that's cool. And if it's in the middle, I'm not so sure. Okay, but let's move on to this species, which is refreshingly straightforward to identify. Brody, what bird is this? You probably recognize this bird.
Osprey.
It is, in fact, an osprey. And they make a cool whistle vocalization that I'm just going to skip because we need to move along. And then this bird, which I was talking about, which you've probably seen too in Carpinteria. One of my favorite birds from the time I was first bird watching. When I first saw one of these, I was like, oh, well, that is just the coolest bird ever. And I still think that whenever I see it. This is the white-tailed kite. Okay, is that, no, and then we've got this bird. So I talked about this. This is the one with the facial disc. So you can kind of see a little bit of the facial disc here. And this is the northern harrier. The male is sort of gray and white and black. This is the male. And then the immature birds and the females are brown. But in both species, they have this really prominent white rump. So when they're flying, you see that the upper surface of the tail, the base of the tail, if it's bright white, you're probably looking at a northern harrier. And again, they've got that dihedral, so their wings are kind of in the shape of a V, and they're kind of rocking, and they're flying low over the marsh or the meadow as they hunt. Northern harrier, very cool bird. Oh yes, and now the murder parrots, the falcons. So this is our most common falcon. It's the little bitty one that's cute, unless you're a small bird or an insect that is being attacked by it, in which case it's not cute at all. It's probably quite terrifying. And here, I'll go ahead and play a recording because you hear this a fair amount, and it's worth knowing its vocalization. This is a recording by Jerome Fisher. And this is the American Kestrel. Very cool little falcon. And then this falcon, which is not that much, I think it's a little bigger. It's certainly more powerful than the Kestrel. So this is the Merlin. And again, the fall and winter, I think, is when we get these. I'd have to go back and look at those histograms again. They're about the same size as a Kestrel, but if you, again, you get that Raptor ID app where you just, get used to seeing them and recognizing their flight characteristics, they're a much faster flyer. Like when a Merlin is going by, they zip, they are moving fast. Kestrels kind of have this sort of light, buoyant flight, and then they'll stop and they'll hover and they'll stay in one place while they look at the thing they're going to pounce on. But Merlins are just, they've got places to be and they get there very quickly. So it's a very cool little falcon. And then this bird, the aforementioned fastest animal on the planet, the Peregrine Falcon. I've seen them around carp more in the last year or two, I want to say, than previously. Like, I think they may have bred in the area this year. I think there was maybe a nest up in the cliffs around here. It seemed like they were around a fair amount this past summer. Anyway, they are significantly bigger than your Kestrels or your Merlins. That very fast falcon flight style. So always very exciting to see a peregrine falcon. The long pointed wings, elongated body. Very cool bird. Okay, so those are the 10 easier ones. So how are we doing? Are we good to keep going, or is this too much information too fast? You guys are all very good about staying muted, and then I think, oh, you know.
Yeah, just like you have always liked the white-tailed kite.
Yeah, yeah, it is a great bird. It's just, it's so graceful. It's just like, to me, it really embodies, you know, a lot of the cool things about.
And then it has the red eyes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's your background. I forgot about that. Yeah. So obviously you're a white-tailed kite fan to have it as your virtual background. Okay, so let's talk about the harder to see species. And now I'm going to talk about hawk watching. So up till now, I've sort of been talking about looking at raptors as part of your general day-to-day birding, you know, sort of general purpose birding that you're doing. Let me see. Sorry, there is a chat message. Imagine where I be seen. So Rob, you said in chat, can I mention where something be seen? I'm not sure. Can you unmute and give more detail?
Yeah, it went back to when you were, you were talking about the different morphs of red-tailed hawk.
Oh, yeah.
And a few days ago, we had dark morph red-tailed refugio. And it's a spectacular bird. You don't see them that often, but
yeah, no, definitely the light morph is the one we see a lot more
all
of.
dark brown. It's just,
yeah.
And then the other thing I want to mention, red-shouldered hawk, you're almost guaranteed to at least hear them at the far end of Gobernador Canyon Road, where it comes out in 150. It seems every time I've been there, I've had red-shouldered hawk.
Yeah, and they're cool because they're sort of they're perch hunters. Like they will like sit on a telephone pole or on a tree branch, and they'll just sit there and just look at the ground, waiting for something to move that they can drop on. And they actually live in forests. You know, they're sort of forest hunters. The place I always see them, I always see one is along Via Real. Like if I'm driving, like west of Carpinteria, like past Seaside Gardens, and you know, on a Via Real that way. There seems like there's always one hanging around next to Via Real over there. So look for that. But to get back to hawk watching, so there are among birders those who specialize in raptors, who just, you know, they get so excited looking at raptors that it's all they want to do, or at least it's what they want to do a lot of. And so that brings me to hawk watching. So hawk watching is kind of this specialized kind of bird watching, sort of like sea watching, you know, for pelagic birds. But with hawk watching, you find a spot and you let the hawks come to you. So you go to a spot that has a lot of raptors, especially during migration. There are certain places that tend to funnel the migrating hawks into one specific spot. And that's where hawk watchers like to go. And back east, there are places like Cape May, New Jersey, where, you know, they will get thousands of hawks per hour. Just like you'll be sitting there and the hawks are just kind of streaming by in big numbers. I've never seen this, but I've read about it. It seems very exciting. And maybe you've seen this, Rob.
Hawk Mountain, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Hawk Mountain. So places where these ridges that the hawks follow, you know, that in migration, you can find a spot where they're coming through and just sit there and they will just keep coming through. So, so if you're interested in seeing more of these rarer hawk species in Santa Barbara County, I would encourage you to explore hawk watching. It's a very different kind of bird watching. You know, I find that as I've done more bird watching of different types, it's like they're all their own unique thing. Like I can be an experienced bird watcher of one type of bird watching and be a complete beginner at another type of bird watching, and I have to learn. It's just very different. So hawk watching is like that for me. I've been doing it a little while now and I enjoy it a lot. And it is, you know, its own thing. It's patience and being willing to, like, you know, look off in the distance and see a distant hawk and try and figure out what it is. And if you get a close view, it's probably going to be quick. Like it's going to be coming by and it's there and it's gone, you know. So it's long intervals of kind of not much happening and then brief intervals where it's very exciting. So anyway, hawk watching. Oh, so I wanted to share this video. I thought this was cool. And I guess, you know, how are people feeling? Do you want to see like a 5-minute video of hawk watchers at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory? We could save that time and get through the meeting faster. I see a thumbs up from Brody. That's good enough for me. Thank you, Brody. So let's go ahead and we'll watch this video. And oh, I'll give you sound too.
There's just nothing more beautiful than being on the top of the hill and seeing a bird soaring.
Are you guys hearing the audio? Give me a thumbs up.
I really love it. I never get tired of it. I never get tired of the views.
By being part of this program, I really get to see the essence of the bird.
Well, the first time I stood on Hawk Hill was completely foggy. It was August. We saw nothing.
I was a little scared after all the training.
I definitely was aware of how much learning I had to do.
I think that went away in about 3 minutes. You know, you just get into it, and when you're an apprentice, the people are really, really helpful.
If I can tell you what it's like to stand up on the hill now, it's a 360-degree view, and I never get tired of being on the hill.
Very different than I expected. It was incredibly moving.
There's a certain awareness that you're dealing with something that you've never really experienced.
It was just exhilarating. The red tail, they're looking up at you, smiling at you. It's just a wonderful feeling.
We all managed to fit, even though we're coming from so many different backgrounds. You look forward to coming and having just experiences that make you ecstatic.
There's so many diverse people, so they're from all different backgrounds, and yet you all are here doing the same thing because there's a passion that you have.
My Tuesday 2 group really has become one of my families, I guess.
When I was in school, I never was a science person. I've amazed myself because over the years, the science has actually become more important.
I think a lot of people see science as this big, scary thing. You're either a scientist or you're not. GGRO sort of creates this world where that divide doesn't exist.
My view of science from a citizen perspective has changed, that citizens can contribute to science in a meaningful and significant way.
When I started with this program, I was in art school. After a couple years being out here and seeing just the amazing amount of new things that you could learn every day, it just made me say, wow, I should have gone to school for biology.
My view of raptors changed to kind of encompass this majesty and this almost literary quality to them.
It's real special for me to be able to, as a bander, handle raptors and be close to such a wild thing.
You know, this phenomenon of migration that's gone on for so long, and we get to be a part of it.
So that is a little video for the volunteer program at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, the same ones that did that cool experiment where they, measured their success rates and distinguishing Coopers and Sharp-shinned Hawks. And I'm going to talk about them in a minute again too, because there's another way in which they're very significant for our hawk watching efforts here in Santa Barbara County. So I just wanted to share some of my favorite hawk watching sites in Santa Barbara County. You don't have to go far to go hawk watching, but if you're willing to, there's some very cool places you can get to. So one of them, actually I have mixed feelings about. I wasn't sure I was going to share this one. This was one of my favorite, was actually my favorite spot to go hawk watching in Santa Barbara County. And it's out at south of Lompoc. You take I Street south and you go past Miguelito County Park, and eventually you come to this wide open bowl with ground squirrels and raptors, and there's golden eagles and prairie falcons, and it's just an amazing site. It is also a site where there is now a big wind energy project going in. So And there was a process and an environmental review process. And I was one of the people saying, hey, you know, there's issues with raptors and they're being affected by these wind turbines. But the county made their decision and the construction is happening. And, you know, I was there actually today. This is a photo from a few months ago, but it is not the same as it was. And to me, that's unfortunate. Renewable energy is important, and hopefully, you know, they'll manage it in a way that it doesn't cause a lot of raptor deaths. But I will move on to a more positive topic. And we'll talk about other places you can go. So the Cuyama Valley up in the extreme northeastern corner of Santa Barbara County is sort of a, I don't know, it's a destination for Santa Barbara County birders who really want to work on their list. It's like there's desert habitat, there's these wide open spaces, and the raptors really like it. It is a very exciting place to go hawk watching. It looks sort of like this, and like this, and you kind of get a feeling like these rarer raptors, they like big open spaces. You know, they're not necessarily hanging around human cities so much. So if you really want to see these more shy raptors, this is the kind of place you should spend your time. And it has its compensations if you go spend your time there, because you have these amazing views. All right. So this species is one that I have seen out in the Cuyama Valley amongst other places in Santa Barbara County. It is a very cool falcon. You can tell it has that falcon shape. It's actually a little bigger than a peregrine falcon. This is the prairie falcon. And it is very much a bird of open country, and just super cool bird. It's lighter colored, a lighter brown on the back than a peregrine falcon would be. And if you can see the under part, it has this black axillary feathers, sort of black wing pits here and black here underneath the wings. The under wing coverts are this sort of blackish pattern that will help distinguish it as a prairie falcon. And then this bird is a buteo, as you can see from its sort of soaring shape here. This comes in several different color morphs. This is actually a Swainson's hawk. And I'm not going to get too much into, again, I'm going to try and save time, but it's a very cool hawk. And a lot of them come through in the spring migration is really the best time to see them in Santa Barbara County. And in fact, here in Carpinteria, if you go up the Franklin Trail or some of the other, you know, local hawk watch sites that I'll talk about in a minute, you have a good chance of seeing a fair number of Swainson's hawks. They'll actually come through in flocks. I've seen like a dozen of them at a time before, which was very exciting. And they're just all up there flying around together. One of the things that kind of distinguishes them is they've got this, the flight feathers are darker. So they got this dark gray or black primaries and secondaries on the underside of the wing. That's sort of the opposite of most hawks. Most hawks are lighter on the trailing edge there, but these Swainson's hawks have this black in the back effect. And there's other color morphs look even more that way. So again, consult your field guide or your Raptor ID app, and it will give you many looks at the different color morphs for Swainson's hawks. And then this one is very cool. This is one of the largest buteos, because eagles, although I always think of them as being buteos, are technically not buteos. They're a different subgroup, but they're sort of buteo shaped. So I think of them as in that grouping. But amongst the true buteos, this is the one with the greatest wingspan that we have around here. And this is the ferruginous hawk, which again, I think is just a super cool looking bird.
I have never heard of that before.
Well, if you play your cards right, you could see one. There's not a lot of them around in Santa Barbara County, but certainly out in the Cuyama Valley is one place you can see them. And again, some of these more, I'll talk about different hawk watch sites, but some of these more remote parts of the county, you've got a good chance. And if you check in eBird, when people see them, they're here in the winter, so they're not really, I think they're not here yet, but they should be here soon. And when they're around, you'll see them show up in the eBird lists, and you can, say, oh, if I want to see one, I will go there. And then you have a good chance of seeing one. So another hawk watch location that's really cool is if you take the 154 out of Santa Barbara, you go over the Santa Ynez Mountains and then down past Lake Cachuma. There's this place called Armor Ranch Road, and then Happy Canyon Road leads off to the east from there. And it's just sort of wide, open, rolling, grassy fields, very popular with raptors. So it's a good place to go hawk watching. And here I am. This was probably not a good time of day. This is like sunset, so this is not a good time of day for hawk watching. The hawks had probably already settled down when I took this photo. But that's what it looks like out there. And this was along Happy Canyon Road. I really like that this coyote went just trotting by. You see cool things, you know, when you're hawk watching, as I say, it's a lot of just sitting around waiting for something to show up. But, you know, you see stuff like a coyote running across the road. So it's kind of fun. And some of the raptors you might see out there are this one. And I thought it was cool to include a human for scale in this one. So you can kind of see how big this raptor truly is. And this is a golden eagle. This is a very, very large raptor. When you see them soaring, and they'll be soaring with like a red-tailed hawk, you realize like, oh, there's this little tiny hawk up there, and then there's this golden eagle. Because a red tail, which normally seems quite big, looks quite small next to a golden eagle. So the younger golden eagles tend to have these white feathers on the underside of the wings, and the white feathers tend to be concentrated out here at the base of the primaries. And that's helpful. And then this tail pattern is also a golden eagle thing where it's white at the base and then dark at the tip in the younger golden eagle. But it's helpful because you want to distinguish between this bird and this bird. So this is the bald eagle, which is also basically ginormous. And you also get them out in these parts of Santa Barbara County. Bald eagles tend to eat fish. There's a wintering population that hangs out, you know, a small population, a small number of them that hang out at Lake Cachuma. So they're out there flying around in those interior parts of the county. When you see an immature bald eagle, it has a lot of white on the underside of the wings too, but instead of being concentrated out here at the base of the primaries, like the immature golden eagle was, its white is concentrated more in the axillary region, in the like wing pits in here where the prairie falcon was black. The immature bald eagle has a lot of white there. And they go through a several year process of getting more and more like the adult bald eagle, like the one you're familiar with, we see on the right here. And they're also, like their beak is bigger and heavier. Like it's kind of a subtle thing to notice, but you know, the sort of the face of a golden eagle has a certain look to it. And it's got quite a respectable beak, but the bald eagle's beak is even just a little bit bigger and heavier in relation to the rest of its head. So that's something you can look for too if you're, you know, just confirming. I don't know, it's hard to keep track of little details like that. When you've got an eagle in front of you, it's so exciting. You're like, oh, wow, it's an eagle. But yeah, anyway, those are cool things you can see. Okay, so a lot of these hawk watch sites I've talked about are kind of a a long drive. It's an hour or two away to get to some of these places. But we have a really cool pair of hawk watch sites right here locally. So I want to talk about this. And this is the Romero Canyon Fire Road hawk watch site and the Bella Vista Drive hawk watch site. So here's sort of a Google Earth view of them. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and click through. This will work, hopefully. Yeah, so we can take a look at this map and I can kind of be a little more interactive and sort of show you what it's like. So if you go out to the 192, you go up Toro Canyon Road and you get up to the top of Toro Canyon Road and it turns to the west and you go along what becomes East Valley Road, the 192, and you come to Ladera Lane, which is this long street here that kind of leads up towards the mountains. And you go all the way up to the north end of Ladera Lane and it turns and becomes Bella Vista Drive. And here, there are these two hawk watch sites. And Eric Culbertson actually sort of pioneered these. And what Eric did, a local bird watcher who you may have seen in a previous meeting, because I've had him on to sort of be the honored guest as I pepper him with questions. He's a great local bird watcher. And he, saw that these broad-winged hawks that I'll look at in a second, it's mostly an eastern species, but a small number of them were coming through the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory every year. Just a few of them just go off the wrong way. They go off to the Pacific coast. And they migrate south to Mexico and beyond. So they should be coming through, he figured, but they were very rarely seen in Santa Barbara County. So he thought, well, I should try to find a place where I can see them in migration. So what he ended up doing was he found this spot up here on a fire road above Ramiro Canyon. So if you hike the Ramiro Canyon Trail, it goes up into this little notch here. And it goes up and then it comes, you can follow it back along this fire road and it comes up to this spot up here. And if you look at it, basically from this spot, you have this great view to the west. And that's where the migrating hawks are coming along. They follow this ridge line. So you can see them in the distance and you can follow them all the way in and overhead. And he said, you know, there ought to be broad-winged hawks coming through there. And he went up and sure enough, there were broad-winged hawks coming through there. So since then, every fall, a number of us go out there and see if we can see the broad-winged hawks coming through. It's very exciting. Well, it's exciting if you're into things like that. And I happen to be into things like that.
So when is that?
Well, funny you should ask. So let's go ahead and talk about, oh, before I go and talk about when that is, I should point out the lower Hawkwatch site down here on Bella Vista Drive, it doesn't have quite as good a view. Your view to the south, you know, this direction is kind of blocked by some trees and stuff, but you have still a pretty good view along here and you can see the hawks coming by along the hillside. And ideally what you want is you want hawk watchers down here and hawk watchers up here. And then they can, because when we've done that in past years, like we will see hawks from the upper site that they didn't see at the lower site. And they'll see hawks at the lower site that we totally missed up at the upper site. So, you know, and the other thing is that the lower site is much easier to get to. You can just park right here along Bella Vista Road and walk up to this little, you know, part of the road here. And there's shade, it's very hospitable, it's very nice. And you can get there without a half-hour, 45-minute hike up the fire road, which is what you have to do to get up here. So either one is good. Okay, but I need to go back to the presentation to talk about when you want to do this. So here's the view from that fire road from the upper Hawkwatch site. And this is the view looking west towards Santa Barbara. And this is where the hawks come along. You just see them as little specks out here and they get closer and closer and closer and there they are, wow, and then they're gone. But it's fun. And this is the view from the lower Hawkwatch site. So this is the wall along Bella Vista Drive where the property owner here has been very kind. And, you know, there was some concern, there were some questions asked at first when, you know, this group of people showed up with binoculars and telescopes and cameras with giant lenses. And, you know, this is sort of, you know, the land of Hollywood, Montecito homes, and someone might have thought, oh, are these paparazzi camping out in front of my property? And we explained that, no, we don't care about you at all. We're looking at the hawks. And so once they knew that, they were fine with it. So again, this is the wall you kind of stand next to and you can look up. This is looking towards the east, but if I had taken the shot the other way, you could see that same view along there. And this is what you're looking for. So this is a broad-winged hawk. It's a little hawk. It's basically the size of a red-shouldered hawk. It's relatively small. You'll see them soaring with red-tailed hawks. You're like, wow, that hawk is really small. But if it's soaring by itself, it's easy to mistake for a red-tailed hawk because it just looks like, you know, a little compact buteo. It's just up there circling around. But there are some things you can look for. It's got this white trailing edge to the wing on the immature, which is what we're looking at here. Actually, is this an adult? I am not sure. I need to study my broad-winged hawks more. Anyway, this is like what we see a lot. So these white wings with no dark patagial bar and a black border is sort of a broad-winged hawk look. So this is sort of an interesting study. I'm going to skip past it, but what they basically did is they radio tagged 5 broad-winged hawks up at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory to say, where do they actually go? Because this is important for things like wind energy projects. You know, they want to know where are these rare raptors migrating, so we can maybe avoid putting, you know, windmills there. So they tagged 5 of them up here at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. Broad-winged 1, BW1 through 5. BW3 did not make it. BW3, this is the inset showing the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. They tagged it. It showed up the next day in the area, and then the day after that, the radio signal went here and stopped moving. and they eventually recovered the carcass of BW3 there. It was killed by what looks like another raptor, like it had a puncture wound that looked like what a raptor might have done to it. So that one didn't make it, but the other 4 did, and they tracked them as they migrated south. And as they came through the area where we are, now this map is kind of skewed a little bit, so north is not up, it's off to the right. But basically Carpinteria, these 2 little nubbins here, this is Coal Oil Point, and that's Campus Point in Santa Barbara. And Carpinteria is basically right in here, I think. Yeah, right down in here. And what these hawks did, one of them went inland, but the other 3 came right down the Santa Ynez Crest. And the track is not super accurate. You know, they were using radio direction things, and they had sort of approximate ideas of where they were. So basically they're following those ridges. So that Bella Vista Hawkwatch site and that Romero Canyon Fire Road Hawkwatch site, or, you know, if you're just a mile or so east at Toro Canyon Park, you know, in the area of Toro Canyon Park, like I know some of our Carpinteria Birdwatchers members are, if you get a good view of the sky when the broad-winged hawks are coming through, you have an excellent chance of seeing a broad-winged hawk. So here are the numbers. So this is when you should look for them. These are the broad-winged hawk numbers from the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory over the years. And this is plotting broad wings per hour that they've seen there. So today is September 24th, I think I said. Yeah, today is September 24th. So we are right here. So it is happening. We are in the window. So, and these little tick marks are a week apart. So basically the next week or 2 is the time. So if you're ever going to go up and stand around and, you know, look like a paparazzi hanging out in front of that wall in Montecito, or you want to go up the Romero Canyon Trail and look from that Hawkwatch site, these are the 2 weeks to do it this year, when you've got a better than average chance that a broad-winged hawk might come through. And in previous years, we could actually look at the daily hawk counts from the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, and you could see when the broad-wing pulses would happen. Usually it's when there's like a good northwest wind. That's what really pushes them along, and that's when they all start moving. This year,
how long does it take to get here?
like a day or 2, like a couple days, 2 to 3, I guess. Yeah, it's hard to say. You know, it's just how much ground they cover, and is it foggy or is it windy, and how long do they spend? They tend to start moving about an hour and a half to 2 hours after sunrise, and they tend to stop moving an hour and a half to 2 hours before sunset. So that middle of the day time is the best time. That's when they're actively on the move. So go look for your broad-winged hawks, and you can stand there and take a selfie in the little driveway mirror and look like a bit of a dork out there with your hawk watching gear, waiting for the hawks to come by. People are very friendly. They you know, there's not a lot of traffic on the road, so people will slow down and say, "Hey, what are you looking for?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm looking for broad-winged hawks," and have a little conversation while you're waiting for the birds to appear. All right, so that is it for the hawk content. You made it all the way through to the end. So thank you, everybody. Any final questions or comments? I kind of lost track of the chat. Butterfly said, thank you. She's going to her Santa Barbara City College class now. That's great. Yeah, I know I went long, Butterfly. See you.
We're from, Tom, I don't know whether we're from Vermont.
Uh-huh.
We're watching from the East Coast.
Oh, wow.
We're friends of Rob, and we spend a lot of time in Carp in the winter season. We look forward to meeting you, but thank you very much. This was really great. Rob suggested it, and you've been emailing us, so, and nice to meet you all.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thanks for joining us. This is great. You know, last meeting we had someone from Alaska. This meeting we've got you folks. Our empire is growing. Our influence is spreading.
Not too much.
Yeah, no, not too much. All right, everyone. Well, thank you again. You know, I'm probably going to be up there in the next few days. I'm going on a small trip. I'm driving out to Arizona next week. And the one regret I have is that it's kind of coming in the important broad-winged hawk window. So I'm hoping that I can see one maybe this weekend if one comes through. And there was an alert today. Someone reported a broad-winged hawk from San Luis Obispo County. So they're up there. They're coming. So you just got to be in the right place at the right time, and they fly on by. So see if you can see one, and I will see if I can see one. And otherwise, you know, does anyone have a suggestion for next time in 2 weeks? What you want to talk about? I haven't really thought of it. I've been so focused on the hawks that I didn't even think about what would come after the hawks.
Maybe we could do grosbeaks or grosbeaks and sparrows or ducks.
You know, both of those would be timely, right? Because winter is sort of sparrow season. Some new sparrows are showing up that haven't been around for a while, and that's kind of exciting. And ducks are showing up. You know, Rob Denholtz, are you still here, Rob? I don't see you I don't see your thumbnail. Maybe you're there and I just don't see the thumbnail. Anyway, he was telling me that he had a male gadwall today. So sort of a first of season male gadwall showing up. So that's exciting. Yeah, we got more ducks in the next few weeks should be showing up.
And warblers are showing up.
Warblers, yeah.
And the warblers, yeah, the fall warblers. I'm thinking crack of dawn tomorrow. I'm gonna try and be out at Refugio and see if that Tennessee warbler that's been seen there the last several days will stay for one more day, because I'd really like to see that bird. And of course, I'll probably go out there and then someone will see it in carp, and I'll be like, oh, I should have stayed home. But that's the way it is. There's not much you can do about that. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I had a lot of fun, and watch the blog to see what we actually talk about next time, and I will see you guys then.
It was very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brody.